Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for tuning in. I, of course, am Rotype, and welcome back to Cedar Valley Redux, where there's been a little bit in between episodes, not too much. But as usual, we'll go ahead and go over just a couple things that I've been working on off camera. The most noticeable is probably just the extension of the city. You can see here, I've just been working on this same grid pattern we have with the avenues on the outside and then the fill it in with the streets on the interior. And I've zoned most of these. I'll go ahead and bring up the zoning view in the same pattern with commercial along the actual avenue, some office buffer zones, and then residential in between. And I've done that not necessarily because it's the most realistic, although I suppose it is somewhat realistic, mostly because all of these buildings are in this homemade tall New York theme that I've done. And you can't really tell the difference between a commercial building or an office building. So in my mind, they're all kind of mixed use. And that's the way I feel like these cities are in general. Most of these areas are going to be mixed use. I mean, sure, you're going to get a little more commercial on the busier roads and a little bit pretty much just residential on the interiors. But as I said, in my head, they're mostly mixed use. They look mostly mixed use. I mean, let's see if we can zoom in here. This building, I believe, being on the interior, is zoned as high density residential and nothing else. But we've got this, commercial thing down here on the bottom. And so they look mixed use, like I said. So I'm going to use them like that. And that's why I have the sort of the pattern, but that's really just to kind of game the simulation to make sure that the residential zone buildings don't complain about noise that the commercial zones will be producing, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll all generally look like this. And then my plan is, and I'll go to this view a little bit just to show that off. I've done a bit more zoning, districting. I guess that's now a word, to kind of lay out the plan. Now you'll still see I have these rename me's that I haven't really come up with a good name for yet, but I'm coming up with an idea of what I want to do with the rest of the city, at least parts of it. And you'll see here I have this de-urbanizing kind of label over here. And that's where I'm going to stop probably using this tall New York theme and move out into, well, I don't really know what yet, but something else that will be a little bit less urban. Obviously, at least initially, we'll be in this grid. I'll probably either go to either a different grid or the same grid, but a little more spaced out, in addition to using some buildings that aren't necessarily wall to wall to give it a little bit more, de-urban, I suppose suburban is the proper term, a little bit more of a de-urban, suburban feel, and not so much just like this tall New York theme everywhere, because I feel like we're probably reaching about the limit of where I want to carry that. So over here, you'll see this is still big box. I added slash mall because I'm not really sure what I want to do. Maybe I'll put a mall, here and then go with big box stores along here. But that's still the plan for this area. I have zoned this off. It's probably a little bit larger than it will end up overall, but I'm going to call this some kind of park area to transition between the big box area, big box mall zone into the urban area. I'm not sure how I want to do that transition over here. Obviously, we have this train line running through. And I don't know, obviously I have to do something about it. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep these all level crossings that will kind of mess with traffic. But right now, as you can see, it's not too bad. We have some backing up here, but it's not too bad yet. We'll see. But I don't necessarily think I want a big, long park. I don't know. Maybe I do. Maybe I'll make it really narrow. But like I said, I'm not sure what I want to do over here. So that will be left alone for now. Over here, you can see I've done a bit more of the roads. I believe this interchange has been there for a while, but I've kind of carried this way and turned Waterside Street up away from the water, where I actually renamed it, or the game renamed it, Harris Boulevard, I suppose. But this road, this avenue here is parallel to at least a segment of this highway. You can see that obviously the highway kind of curves off, but initially, like right in here, it is parallel. Now I decided to make this a 90-degree, and I think I'm going to make this a grid. Maybe, maybe not, but this will be kind of an industrial area. And my plan for this is to kind of go with this whole area was perhaps industrial initially, and then maybe the stadium came in over here and people started utilizing the beach a little bit more. So this the closer you get into the stadium, the more this turns into a little bit more, I believe the term gentrified or something, just a little bit nicer. We're going to use some of those Rico lofts that look a little bit nicer than just kind of generic grimy warehouses. And then over here, and as you go out into this area, we're going to start slipping into, like I just said, kind of grimy warehouses, possibly still in use kind of stuff. And as you'll notice down here, I do have a demand for industrial. So we'll see if we can kind of fill that in with some that look good and aren't the vanilla industrial, because I really don't like most of the vanilla industrial buildings. They look a little too fancy. So we'll see what we can do in this area for that. But that's where this kind of road network came, and basically my plan for this area. Let's see, what else did I do? I believe in between episodes, correct me if I'm wrong in comments, I'm sure you will, but I redid this area into a nightlife zone. I'm going to pause the simulation because it's getting a little bit framey, but I'm going to turn this into, I believe I've talked about this a little before, but the beach is going to be over here. And so this is going to be our kind of, bars and clubs and maybe hotels. At one point I did have the tourism specialty, and the hotels that it grew were enormous. They're very, very tall buildings that didn't really work with the theme I'm kind of setting up here, especially because I've already transitioned from the tall New York to the not so tall New York over here. So I don't want these buildings to then all of a sudden be giant again. I think that would look a little weird. So I've kept this on the leisure specialty and not the tourism. And that way we get these, this is probably one of the tallest buildings that grow. And you get, I guess, a bank on top, but diners, let's see, I guess lots of diners. The one thing, this specialty thing is nice, but there aren't a whole ton of different models that it grows. So you'll end up with a lot. You see, I got a lot of these, one there, one there. Okay, they're different colors, but I don't know. It's helpful, but it's a little bit annoying that there aren't any more assets. And I don't think a lot of people have focused on the workshop on making assets for this, because I believe this specialty thing is an after dark feature. You have to actually have the expansion. So maybe people don't really care to make special things for the expansion. I do have, however, a couple Rico items here. I have some of these clubs, and I've honestly had these so long that I've forgotten who made them. I apologize. I should give you some credit because these are all pretty cool. I have, 6 or 8 of them maybe. And so these will definitely go in here to break up a little bit of the monotony and just kind of, spice up this area. So that's the plan for this area. And I'll kind of carry that in and a little bit in here too. I can imagine this being a pretty cool place to hang out. Maybe you go see a ball game and then kind of come back here and you have bars and clubs and all kinds of fun stuff going on there. I believe these parking garages weren't here, but that's nothing exciting, right? Just a couple of parking garages. Let's see, what else have I done in between episodes? I think that's about it. I have started to lay out a bit more of Port McCarthy, but nothing really too fancy yet. Just a couple extra streets kind of crossing this entranceway of train tracks. So as you can see here, I tried to do something not just on the grid with the building, even though the roads are on the grid. So I think this is kind of nice. I'm going to try and start doing some of that, particularly where the train track comes in and is not on the grid. It's at this angle. We'll start trying to mix things up a little bit like that. And you'll also see I'm leaving some space here that will be either concrete or just kind of dirt, but not just packed in with buildings. I think I talked about this a little bit in the past, just not necessarily cramming in my industrial buildings quite as much as I have here, leaving a bit of space for just yards and, junk, all kinds of stuff. So like I said, I'll continue to work on this, probably mostly off camera, but we'll pop in every now and then to just take a look, see what the status of things are. And with that, I believe we are ready to go ahead and jump into what we're working on this episode. And what I want to do is really just start with this lofts area that I was talking about, because I think that will be a good way to transition in this direction. As I said before, we have this industrial demand we need to work with. So first thing is I'm going to go in and find some of these lofts, which I believe are near the end of my, here we go. So I have a few here. I guess these aren't those are tiny. Let's go ahead up to, here they are. So these buildings that look like they could have been industrial, but maybe they've been kind of cleaned up a little bit. And you know what? Let's move the sun a little bit around so this is not quite so bad. Let's see, play with this. There we go. Now I can see a little bit more clearly. So yeah, I'm going to try and probably create some kind of industrial campus looking area, or what used to be an industrial campus. And then now they've turned it into just a series of buildings that people now can live in. In my experience, pay an exorbitant amount of money because, you know, you get a fancy loft that has recently been renovated and all that stuff. So let's see if we can get something that looks a little bit realistic in that manner. And obviously, I mean, you can imagine this would be a great location right across from the ballpark and this, you know, nightlife area. So let's see. I usually see a lot of parking lots involved in these kind of areas. And especially if you can think about them, you know, used to be a industrial zone. The industrial zone usually used to have, or I would think would have, a lot of parking for employees and such. So they can just kind of keep that parking around and then just use it for the residents of the now lofts. What I want to do, I want to try and mirror this, see if I can get it to work properly. No, I need parking. This was my 8x6. No, that was not it. 8x4. Yeah, there we go. So I think we'll kind of do this parking in the middle thing and then try to kind of surround it with different lofts representing the industrial buildings, and maybe let's turn snapping off so I don't have to deal with that. How does that look? I do need to make the entrance. Let's see what I can do about that. Tricky thing about this new snapping tool, these new snapping tools they've brought in with the latest patch are pretty nice, but sometimes they don't seem to work well. I mean, you're snapping to so many different things, and then instead of just turning snapping off, you got to open this menu up. It's a little irritating, but that's fine. We'll work with what we have. I don't know why. There we go. Can't find this thing. We're just going to do it with the keyboard so I don't have to worry about it anymore. There we go. And now before I forget, of course, we're going to turn off parking here. And I do like to see that they are already starting to use this parking lot. And this helps me out in that I don't have to do it myself. And we'll go in and add details later. I'm going to bulldoze this a little bit. And let's take a look at what other lofts we have. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton, which would be nice, you know, nice to have a whole bunch that you can use, but we'll work with what we have. This one, I kind of want to, you know, use the corner of this. There we go. That looks kind of cool, you know, right across from the stadium. You could possibly like, oh yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the way this asset is created, they don't have chairs, but you can imagine like sitting up here and watching a game. That could be cool. We do need something to kind of fill in this backside. So let's see what we can find again that will work. Maybe one of these, let's see, these buildings. Yeah, that could work. Unfortunately, it's not letting me put it where exactly I want to, but that's fine. We'll just use move it here to grab these two and tuck them right up next to this loft. Yeah, there we go. So there's a nice little area there. And then again, I don't want to forget my parking. I normally don't like doing too much parking, but I feel like this is an area that you really kind of need some parking. And here we go again with all these snapping things. Maybe road guidelines, turn that off. We still got the grid, but that's fine. Yeah, there we go. All right. So if I bring this road in like this, try a curve. Yeah, that'll work. That should be fine. So now from here, we should be able to fit another parking lot. Oops, I already had parking. There we go. So maybe a 5x4. Well, it could be even. Well, yeah, I think I do want to kind of devote most of this area. I'm not going to be too efficient with my space because then it's going to look a little bit too much like, you know, these buildings where they're all packed in. So if I give them a little more space, I think it'll change the aesthetic just a little bit. And that is kind of what we're looking for, you know, switching it up in this transition from the wall-to-wall type stuff into these lofts. So yeah, actually we can even go with a bigger parking lot than that. Let's go, I think the biggest one I have is this 8x6. Yeah. And we'll go ahead and give it a rear entrance. And hopefully the snap isn't going to go crazy on me. You know what? There's an easier way to do this. We're going to grab this node, and we're going to grab this node, and we're going to copy. And now we know we have the same angle. And I can just plop that here. Connect this, and then we'll just bulldoze that there like that. And we'll deal again with the details later. Probably fill in this one a little bit, but. So there's kind of this loft and parking. These two lofts share this parking. Now, as far as the waterfront goes, I almost want to leave it a little bit open, but let's just see what we got here. And a couple of these buildings that I don't use that often that I think would really be useful. Although, yeah, these are a little bit big and they're not quite as industrial. Yeah, maybe these because they're a little bit lower and they still fit the theme. So let's see if I can kind of sneak a few of these in here. Maybe just like 3 of them. And I can use, oh yeah, okay. I think I kind of like how this is working. So yeah, I like this. Let's just see if I can tuck these in a little bit better so they don't look ridiculous on the road behind them. And then the angle is going to be a little tricky. We'll see what I can do about it. Yeah, there we go. As long as, so obviously there's more overlap here than there, but I think as long as there is some overlap, although this is not going to give me quite the rotation that I really need to make this look better. I need this kind of be like that. This one a little bit more rotated. There we go. Okay, so now we move the sun around a little bit. There we go. And take a look at what we have. Let's close move it and just kind of, yeah, there we go. I think I like that as being a formal industrial area. I don't know why this filled with dirt, but I can fix that. And then again, maybe some more parking and maybe, let's see if we can just find one more thing in this back area and this will be our kind of loft zone. So we've used this one. No, but it's tiny. I don't know if I really like that. So let's move on. We've used this one. No, we haven't. All right, good. So we'll use this one in right about there. And this will be our former industrial zone. Yep. And then I'll fill in, again, just more parking. And then I'll leave a little bit more green space that maybe used to be parking or something. Yeah, I like it. So moving on, we'll do some details in there a little bit later, but how are we going to stretch that into this area? So unfortunately, we're running out of lofts, and I don't really want to use these, partially because we've already used them, and partially because they look more like project housing kind of stuff than lofts in formal industrial areas. But maybe we do start migrating down to these smaller buildings. Although the problem with these smaller buildings, see, I'll place one here. And you look around to the back and you can see they're totally made for wall to wall. And they look great over there. But here you can't really leave them sticking out on their own because there would be windows. So you can tell they're made for another building to be snug right up next to them. So that doesn't quite work with what we're trying to accomplish right here. And like I said, unfortunately, it looks like we've already used most of these. So I'm going to have to start reusing them and hope that it doesn't look completely repetitive. And maybe we'll start clipping things together. That's generally a good way to help things from looking a little ridiculous. And actually, this one is a good candidate for clipping. Just seems to mesh really well. I mean, it's a square, right? So it helps. So I'll just place it there for now and then drag this guy out and say this is now, I don't know why it's messing with the terrain. Really don't like when it does that, but Yeah, what I don't understand that one at all, but that's fine. Let's see if I can get it to behave. All right, so let's just see if I can clip this in just a little bit more. There we go. So now that can be a new building, and obviously, if you look carefully, or maybe not even that carefully, you can tell it's a duplicate, but good enough. Now I want to fill in this area with a few more, and again, we're probably just going to try to clip in some of these buildings that we've already used. I do really like this one after an autosave. Unfortunately, it's right there, so it's not even that far away, but maybe I'll try and double it up. Let's see how this looks. Take this in. Let's just overlap it so those match. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, I think I like that. And then back here again, parking and some green space, stuff like that. I'm not going to squeeze things in too much. I do think perhaps one of these little ones, if they do have windows, does this one have windows on the back? I can't tell because of the shadow. No, it doesn't. All right, so what we're going to do is maybe take this other one that doesn't. Oh, that's too tall. Well, maybe not. All right, we'll move that one. And then I'll try to put the no windows parts next to each other, and we can just make a still smaller building, but just kind of stick these two together. Does this have much of a front? It does. Well, that's fine. We'll take care of that with a little detailing. There we go. And then just connect these two a little bit better. There we go. So now we just have this kind of, I don't know, maybe it was once administration or something type building in front. And there we go. So that's kind of these blocks. And again, I'll do parking and detailing later. I do want to finish off this area. So I'm going to take a second to flip through my Rico settings and see what I come up with. Okay, this is what I've come up with. I just filled in a little bit more of this area with a couple more of these industrially lofty type buildings, as you can see here. They're not all residential because I couldn't find everything I wanted. So as you can see, this one's an office. I believe these are also offices. Those are offices, although those really should not be level 3 offices. I'll have to go in and change that. These are offices. Okay, so I guess these are all offices, but I couldn't really find what I wanted. More of these would have just looked a little too repetitive for my tastes. And I figured as we shift into kind of dirty industrial warehousing, as far as the game simulation is concerned, it's going to upset the residential persons, Sims, living in some of these buildings. So I went ahead and switched to something that wouldn't really care as much. I mean, offices are going to complain about things like land value or whatever, but we can make that a little bit better. We can tailor that. So hopefully they won't complain quite so much. So this is the Lofts Old Industrial District, which is going to have to come up with a new name for that eventually, but that'll be this district. I am going to jump into a little bit of a time lapse right now to fill in some, if not all, of the details. And so I hope you enjoy that, and I will see you in a few minutes. Well, that turned into quite a lengthy time lapse. Sorry about that. Turns out there were a lot of things to work on, and I may have underestimated it a little bit, but we did get through it all, and now that it's done, I think I like it. I know there's a lot of green space around, but in my head, that's kind of partially green space that used to be there, but also a lot of areas that could have once been industrial yards, container yards maybe, or just paved areas with, industrial junk in it that they then turned into courtyards and park space. So like I said, I think I like how it came out, and it'll work well once we build the rest of the industrial area and kind of transition into that more open space, even if the industrial area does have a bit more pavement. However, that is all the time I have for this week. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, please go ahead and give me a like and a sub. I really do appreciate it. I'll be back next week with another episode, but until then, my name's been Rotype. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.